Your services are no longer required. The words struck me like a physical blow, leaving me gasping for air in the center of the expansive mahogany boardroom. I had personally chosen that table 12 years ago, back when Apex Industrial Solutions was nothing more than a scrappy startup with grand ambitions. 18 years. 18 long, exhausting years of my life had been poured into building this company from a mere concept into an industry titan. And now they were dismissing me with 7 hollow words and expressionless faces. I scanned the room, looking at the men I had worked alongside for nearly 2 decades. These were men whose families I knew, whose crises I had managed in the dead of night, whose very wealth was built on the foundation of my sweat and ingenuity. Now not a single one of them would meet my gaze. Except Richard. Chief Executive Officer Richard Thorne sat at the head of the table, his eyes locked on mine. His face wore a mask of practiced corporate neutrality, but he could not entirely conceal the faint smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. He was satisfied. The man was thoroughly satisfied to see me fall. My name is Gordon Vance. I am 52 years old, and until 9:15 that Tuesday morning, I was the Chief Operating Officer of Apex Industrial Solutions. We have decided to take the company in a new direction, Richard continued, his voice projecting that polished authority that had once commanded my respect. Julian will be assuming your responsibilities. Effective immediately. Julian. Julian Cross. Richard's 29-year-old son-in-law, who had been with the company for a mere 7 months. The same Julian who had asked me just last week to explain the fundamental principles of supply chain logistics. The same Julian who had been anointed with a vice president title the very day after he returned from his lavish honeymoon with Richard's daughter, Elena. "I see," was the only response I could muster. My own voice sounded hollow and distant, echoing strangely in my ears. And when exactly did the board vote on this monumental shift in strategy? I directed my gaze toward Martin, our chief financial officer, who had literally texted me yesterday evening about our regular Wednesday golf game. Martin suddenly found the grain of the wood table utterly fascinating, refusing to look up. "It was decided last night," Richard smoothly interjected. "We called an emergency session. An emergency session that I, the chief operating officer, was conveniently excluded completely. A session where they unanimously voted to replace me with a former marketing junior whose greatest career achievement was being born into wealth and marrying the right woman. Human Resources has prepared your separation package," Richard said, sliding a thick manila envelope across the polished surface. "I think you will find the terms quite generous. We are not monsters, Gordon." No, I thought bitterly. Monsters would at least possess the decency to be honest about their monstrous intentions. I did not reach for the envelope. 18 years, I said, keeping my voice dangerously quiet. I was here when we had exactly 12 employees working out of a drafty warehouse in the industrial district. I personally wrote the proprietary routing algorithms that secured our first major government contract. I flew to Tokyo with a severe fever to salvage the Pacific Rim deal when every single one of you had already surrendered. The room fell into an uncomfortable, suffocating silence. The collective guilt hung heavy in the air, thick and metallic. "We deeply appreciate your numerous contributions," Richard recited mechanically, clearly reading from a mental script provided by our attorneys. "But Apex Industrial Solutions needs fresh perspectives to navigate the changing landscape. Fresh perspectives." What he truly meant was that his demanding daughter wanted her husband sitting in a corner office. What he meant was that I had grown too influential, too indispensable to the daily operations. What he meant was that my competence was a constant, glaring reminder of his own inadequacies. I stood up, my legs surprisingly steady, despite the raging inferno of betrayal consuming my insides. "I will clear out my office," I stated flatly. "There is no need to rush," Richard offered, with sickening, artificial kindness. "Take the rest of the day. Security will assist you with your personal items." Security. As if I were a common thief, as if I had not sacrificed my weekends, my holidays, and my youth for this very enterprise. I had missed my own brother's wedding to finalize our Series B funding. My life had become inextricably intertwined with Apex, and now they were escorting me out of the building like a disgraced criminal. I walked back to my office, running a gauntlet of curious stares from my team. The news had already spread through the corporate grapevine, a digital wildfire of whispers and instant messages. I could already sense the subtle shifting of allegiances. By lunchtime, my most trusted deputies would be drafting sycophantic congratulatory emails to Julian. My office, with its commanding view of the city skyline, suddenly felt alien and cold. The industry awards on the walls, the framed photographs, the artifacts of a career I was now exiled away. I retrieved a cardboard box and began the profoundly humiliating ritual of packing away my professional life. 18 years of dedication reduced to a single cardboard container. Just as I placed my lucky pen into the box, a soft knock interrupted my grim task. Sarah, my executive assistant for the past 8 years, stood in the doorway, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "They already told me I have to report to him starting tomorrow," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Take the job, Sarah," I told her gently. "You have a mortgage and 2 kids. I understand completely." She nodded, wiping a tear from her cheek. "They are already spreading rumors, Gordon. They are saying you mismanaged the Titan Aerospace account, that your strategies were outdated." The character assassination had commenced. They were rewriting history to justify their treachery. "We both know that is complete fiction," I replied calmly. "The Titan account is the most profitable endeavor in company history." As she turned to leave, my mobile phone began to vibrate on the desk. It was an unknown number. I considered ignoring it, assuming it was a cowardly colleague offering hollow condolences, but an inexplicable instinct compelled me to answer. "Gordon Vance," I answered, my professional veneer still intact. "Gordon, it is Vivian Cole." The name hit me like a jolt of electricity. Vivian Cole, the formidable chief executive officer of Vanguard Logistics, our most aggressive and successful competitor in the sector. "I heard the news," she said smoothly. "I want to meet with you today." Right now, the shock of hearing Vivian Cole's voice was profound. She was the woman Richard Thorne routinely referred to as a ruthless predator, the brilliant strategist who had been relentlessly eroding our market share for the past 3 years. "Vivian," I replied cautiously, ensuring my office door was firmly closed, "this is highly unexpected." "I prefer to be direct," she stated, her tone crisp and radiating absolute confidence. "The corporate world is small, and news of monumental blunders travels incredibly fast. Apex just made the most spectacular mistake in its entire history, and I fully intend to be the one who capitalizes on it. Meet me at the Grand Hotel Lounge in exactly 1 hour. Come alone, and we will discuss how to transform this insult into the greatest victory of your career." The line disconnected before I could even formulate a response. I stared at my phone, my mind racing through a labyrinth of possibilities. Accepting a meeting with our primary competitor on the very day of my termination was risky, but then again I owed Apex absolute nothing. They had severed my loyalty the moment Richard handed my life's work to his unqualified son-in-law. Security arrived shortly after. 2 burly men I had personally approved for hire just last year. They looked embarrassed but resolute. "We are just following protocol, Mr. Vance," the older guard muttered apologetically. "I know," I replied, hefting my meager box of belongings. "Everyone is just following orders." My walk to the elevator was a procession of forced indifference. I kept my head high, refusing to give Richard the satisfaction of seeing me broken. As I stepped out of the glass doors and into the crisp afternoon air, a wave of profound realization washed over me. I was free, unshackled from a toxic environment that chronically undervalued my brilliance. I drove straight to the Grand Hotel, a bastion of old-world luxury that stood in stark contrast to the sterile modern glass box of the Apex headquarters. Vivian Cole was waiting in a secluded booth, sipping sparkling water. She was a striking woman in her late 40s, possessing an aura of commanding authority that Richard could only dream of projecting. She stood and offered a firm handshake. "Gordon, I am glad you decided to come. Please sit." I took a seat, studying her carefully. "Why the sudden interest, Vivian?" "We have spent the last half-decade trying to destroy each other in the marketplace." "Exactly," she smiled, a predatory gleam in her eyes. "And in doing so, I have come to realize that you are the only person at Apex who truly understands the logistics industry. Richard is a relic, a glorified salesman who inherited a good foundation, but you, Gordon, you built the engine that makes Apex run, and now they have thrown the engineer out the door." Her assessment was brutally accurate. I waited for her to present her offer. I want you at Vanguard Logistics, she announced. Not as an employee, as a full equity partner. I am offering you a seat on the board, complete operational autonomy, and the resources to build the systems you always wanted to build, without Richard constantly vetoing your innovations out of sheer insecurity. The magnitude of the offer was staggering. A full partnership at Vanguard was worth millions, offering a level of power and influence I had never achieved at Apex. But I was a man of logic and strategy, not easily swayed by grand promises. Why offer me partnership? You could simply hire me as an executive. Because I do not just want your expertise, Gordon. Vivian leaned closer, lowering her voice. I want your vengeance. I want you highly motivated to systematically dismantle Apex Industrial Solutions. I want to absorb their market share, take their top clients, and watch Richard Thorne's empire crumble into dust. And I know you possess the exact knowledge required to make that happen. I felt a slow, dark smile spread across my face. She understood perfectly. She recognized the burning desire for retribution that was currently fueling my every thought. But there was a crucial detail she did not yet know. A detail that would make her offer not just appealing, but utterly devastating to our mutual enemy. I accept your offer, Vivian, I said softly. But we are not just going to take their clients. We are going to destroy their entire operational capacity overnight. She raised an eyebrow, intrigued. And how, exactly, do you plan to achieve that? I leaned forward, resting my arms on the table. 18 years ago, before Apex became a massive corporation, I developed the core routing algorithm that handles all of our automated supply chain tracking. I was young, but I was smart. I did not give the algorithm to the company. I patented it under my own private limited liability company and licensed it to Apex for a nominal annual fee. It was a standard, auto-renewing contract that Richard inherited when he took over as chief executive officer. He has never bothered to read the fine print. Vivian's eyes widened in realization. The license agreement, she whispered. Precisely. I nodded. The license agreement explicitly states that it is contingent upon my continued employment as a senior executive at Apex. If I am terminated without cause, the license is immediately revoked. As of 9:15 this morning, Apex Industrial Solutions has been utilizing my patented technology illegally. They are committing willful patent infringement under Title 35. United States Code, Section 271. They are completely exposed, and they have absolutely no idea. Vivian let out a low, appreciative laugh that resonated in the quiet lounge. That is absolutely brilliant, Gordon. You have essentially hardwired a self-destruct sequence into the very foundation of their company. A self-destruct sequence that Richard Thorne just gleefully activated, I replied, feeling the intoxicating rush of impending victory. He was so focused on clearing the path for Julian that he completely neglected to consult the foundational intellectual property agreements. But we cannot detonate the bomb just yet. We need to let them commit to their current trajectory, accumulate undeniable evidence of willful infringement, and strike when it will inflict maximum, unrecoverable damage. I appreciate a man with patience and strategy, Vivian said, raising her glass in a silent toast. Welcome to Vanguard Logistics, Gordon. Let us build an empire and bury our enemies. The transition was remarkably swift and seamless. Within 48 hours, I was installed in a sprawling corner office at Vanguard, overlooking the bustling port district. True to her word, Vivian granted me absolute authority over operational strategy. I immediately began implementing the advanced routing systems and predictive supply chain models that Richard had consistently dismissed as overly ambitious or unnecessarily expensive. While I was building the future at Vanguard, I kept a very close watch on the unfolding disaster across town at Apex. My former assistant, Sarah, proved to be an invaluable source of intelligence. She sent me regular encrypted updates from her personal phone during her lunch breaks. Her reports painted a picture of rapid, chaotic decline under Julian's utterly incompetent leadership. Julian is a complete disaster, Sarah texted one afternoon during my second week at Vanguard. He tried to manually override the automated routing protocols for the Western Seaboard shipments because he thought he knew a faster route. He ended up delaying 3 major freight trains by 48 hours. The client is absolutely furious, and Richard is desperately trying to cover it up. I chuckled, sipping my black coffee. The routing protocols Julian had tampered with were, of course, driven by my patented algorithm. By modifying the outputs without understanding the underlying logic, he was not only failing at his job, he was generating a pristine, documented trail of their continued, unauthorized use of my intellectual property. The trap was setting itself. But the true prize, the linchpin of my strategy, was the Titan Aerospace contract. Titan was a massive defense contractor, and their account constituted roughly 35% of Apex's total annual revenue. I had personally managed the Titan relationship for a decade, building an unshakable bond of trust with General Harlan Reed, their director of global procurement. General Reed was a man who valued precision, reliability, and above all, competence. He despised corporate doublespeak and nepotism. I knew exactly how he would react to Julian Cross. 2 weeks after joining Vanguard, I initiated my move. I reached out to General Reed, ostensibly just to inform him of my career transition. We met for lunch at a discreet steakhouse favored by defense contractors. "Gordon, it is incredibly good to see you," the general boomed, shaking my hand with bone-crushing force. I was shocked when I heard the news from Apex. Richard Thorne called me personally to assure me that the transition would be seamless and that his son-in-law was a logistics prodigy. I smiled thinly. "I am sure Julian is trying his best, General, but supply chain logistics for military-grade aerospace components requires a certain depth of experience. Experience that cannot be acquired in 7 months." The general scoffed, cutting into his steak. "The boy is a fool. He sat in my office last week and tried to explain a new efficiency paradigm that made absolutely zero mathematical sense. He completely failed to answer basic questions about our titanium supply chain vulnerabilities. I am severely concerned. Gordon, if Apex cannot guarantee the integrity of our supply lines, Titan will suffer massive production delays." "That is precisely why I wanted to meet with you, Harlan," I said, shifting into a professional, serious tone. "At Vanguard Logistics, I am currently building a dedicated, high-security supply chain infrastructure designed specifically for defense contractors. It utilizes predictive analytics to anticipate disruptions before they occur. It is the system I always wanted to implement at Apex, but lacked the resources and leadership support to execute." I slid a sleek, leather-bound portfolio across the table. It contained a comprehensive, customized proposal for Titan Aerospace, outlining a transition plan that would migrate their entire logistics operation to Vanguard within 60 days with zero downtime. General Reed reviewed the proposal meticulously, his sharp eyes scanning the detailed schematics and operational guarantees. "This is impressive, Gordon. Highly impressive. It addresses every single concern I have regarding the current vulnerabilities at Apex. But breaking our contract with Apex early would trigger a substantial penalty clause." I leaned back, a confident smirk playing on my lips. "You will not have to break the contract, General. Within a matter of weeks, Apex Industrial Solutions is going to be facing a catastrophic legal crisis that will completely paralyze their operations. They will be in material breach of your service-level agreements due to systemic failure. You will have a legal right to terminate for cause without penalty." The general looked at me intently, recognizing the absolute certainty in my voice. He did not ask for details. He was a military man. He understood the value of strategic silence. "If what you are predicting comes to pass, Gordon, Titan Aerospace will sign with Vanguard immediately. Keep me informed. The wheels of my revenge were turning with relentless, beautiful precision. By the end of my first month at Vanguard, the contrast between the two companies was stark and undeniable. Vanguard was experiencing unprecedented growth, securing new contracts based on the superior efficiency of the systems I had deployed. Meanwhile, Apex was bleeding. The internal chaos caused by Julian's ineptitude was manifesting as delayed shipments, lost inventory, and a rapidly deteriorating reputation in the industry. Sarah's texts became increasingly frantic. "Richard is in panic mode," she reported on a rainy Tuesday. "They just lost the global tech account. Julian blamed it on a software glitch, but everyone knows he forgot to submit the customs documentation for their overseas shipment. Richard yelled at him so loudly we could hear it through the soundproof glass, but the most crucial piece of intelligence arrived 3 days later." "Gordon, you need to know this," Sarah wrote. "Richard is pushing through a massive merger with Horizon Dynamics. It is a desperate play to secure capital and hide the operational losses. They are rushing the due diligence process. Horizon Dynamics, a colossal, publicly traded conglomerate seeking to expand its logistics footprint. A merger of that magnitude would normally require months of excruciatingly detailed legal and financial scrutiny. But Richard, desperate to mask the bleeding caused by his son-in-law, was forcing the deal through at breakneck speed. This was the exact moment I had been eagerly anticipating, the fatal error. In a standard due diligence process, competent corporate attorneys would meticulously review every single intellectual property license, including the one governing the core routing algorithm. They would inevitably discover the termination clause triggered by my dismissal. But rushed due diligence, overseen by a panicked chief executive officer and an incompetent vice president, was practically guaranteed to overlook it. They were about to sell a company built on a foundation of stolen technology to a major conglomerate. The liability would be astronomical. I contacted my personal legal team, a group of aggressive intellectual property litigators who had been quietly preparing our case for weeks. The evidence of willful infringement was overwhelming. We had digital logs, server access records, and even internal emails from Julian explicitly discussing the continued use and modification of the algorithm after my termination date. It is time, I told my lead attorney, a sharp-featured man named Robert. Draft the cease and desist order and prepare the federal lawsuit for patent infringement. I want the damages calculated at the absolute maximum statutory limit, factoring in willful intent, and the potential fraud regarding their pending merger. We waited until the absolute perfect moment. The day before the Apex and Horizon Dynamics merger was scheduled to be publicly announced. The day when Richard Thorne believed he had successfully secured his legacy and covered up his monumental mistakes. At precisely 10 in the morning, my legal team formally served Apex Industrial Solutions with a comprehensive federal lawsuit. The document detailed the catastrophic scope of their patent infringement, demanded an immediate nationwide injunction halting their use of my algorithm, and sought damages that easily exceeded the total liquid assets of the company. Simultaneously, a carefully redacted copy of the lawsuit was anonymously delivered to the lead acquisition attorney at Horizon Dynamics. The resulting explosion was spectacular. According to Sarah, whose updates were now coming in real time, the Apex executive floor descended into utter pandemonium. Horizon Dynamics instantly froze all merger proceedings, their legal team demanding immediate answers regarding the undisclosed, massive intellectual property liability. Richard Thorne, realizing the full, horrifying extent of his oversight, reportedly collapsed into his leather chair, clutching his chest. The injunction was granted by a federal judge within 48 hours, citing the undeniable clarity of my license agreement and the overwhelming evidence of infringement. Apex was legally barred from utilizing the core algorithm that ran their entire routing system. They were forced to revert to manual, outdated logistics management. It was like forcing a modern airline to navigate using paper maps and a compass. The results were immediate and catastrophic. Their entire supply chain network ground to a screeching, chaotic halt. Trucks were misdirected, warehouses became completely gridlocked, and critical shipments vanished into the logistical void. It was a complete operational paralysis. Just as I had predicted to General Harlan Reed, Apex instantly breached their service-level agreements with Titan Aerospace. True to his word, the general executed the termination for cause clause and immediately signed a massive, exclusive contract with Vanguard Logistics. The loss of the Titan account was the fatal blow. The heavy silence in the room seemed to stretch for an eternity, pressing down on my shoulders with the weight of unsaid words. I took a deep breath, trying to steady the sudden tremor in my hands as the reality of the situation washed over me. Through the large glass windows, the city skyline stood indifferent, a concrete jungle where only the most ruthless predators survived. Every single detail of this moment burned itself into my memory, etching a permanent scar on my professional soul. The soft hum of the air conditioning was the only sound that dared to interrupt the tense, suffocating atmosphere. The collapse of Apex Industrial Solutions was astonishingly rapid, a masterclass in how quickly an empire can crumble when its foundation is suddenly removed. Within a single week of the injunction, their stock price plummeted by a staggering 60%. Clients fled in droves, desperately seeking the reliability they could no longer find at Apex. Vanguard Logistics, uniquely positioned and fully prepared to absorb the massive influx of business, welcomed them with open arms. The industry press dubbed it a corporate massacre. The board of directors at Apex, the same men who had silently watched Richard Thorne fire me just weeks prior, finally awoke from their compliant slumber. Facing catastrophic personal financial losses and potential shareholder lawsuits for failing their fiduciary duties, they convened an emergency session. This time Richard and Julian were the ones excluded. I sat in my spacious office at Vanguard, enjoying a rare moment of quiet reflection when my phone rang. The caller ID displayed Richard Thorne's private cell number. I let it ring 3 times before slowly answering. "Gordon Vance," I said, my voice perfectly calm and devoid of emotion. "Gordon." Richard's voice was unrecognizable. It was hoarse, trembling, and utterly defeated. The arrogant bravado was completely gone, replaced by the desperate pleading of a ruined man. "The board just fired me, Gordon. Me and Julian. Both of us. Escorted out by security, just like you were." I leaned back in my chair, staring out at the bustling, efficient operations of Vanguard below. "Is that so, Richard?" "I cannot say I am entirely surprised. Actions have consequences. It was a massive mistake, Gordon, replacing you. I see that now. The boy is a fool, and I was blinded by family loyalty. Please, Gordon, the damages your lawsuit is demanding. It will bankrupt me personally. They are piercing the corporate veil because I signed off on the due diligence for the Horizon deal while we were infringing. I will lose everything. My house, my pensions, everything." I felt a cold, hard satisfaction settle deep in my chest. "You did not just replace me, Richard. You tried to erase 18 years of my dedication. You treated me as disposable. You believed you could steal my life's work and hand it to an incompetent child without facing any repercussions. That is not just a mistake. That is unparalleled arrogance." "I can offer you a settlement," he begged, his voice cracking. "Whatever you want. Just please, call off the lawyers." "I want you to understand something, Richard," I replied slowly, enunciating every word. "This was never just about the money. This was about respect. This was about demonstrating, unequivocally, who actually built Apex. You thought you were the king, but you were merely sitting on a throne I constructed, and now I have simply removed the foundation." The line was silent for a long moment, save for Richard's ragged breathing. "There will be no settlement, Richard. The lawsuit proceeds. You will face the full legal consequences of your actions. Goodbye." I disconnected the call and placed the phone face down on my desk. The sense of vindication was absolute, a profound, quiet victory that resonated in my very bones. I had not just survived their betrayal, I had weaponized it. I had transformed their arrogance into the instrument of their own destruction. A few weeks later, Apex Industrial Solutions officially filed for bankruptcy. Unable to overcome the massive legal liabilities and the total loss of their operational capabilities, Vanguard Logistics swooped in and acquired their remaining viable assets for a fraction of their former value. Julian Cross was reportedly unemployed and facing personal litigation from angry investors. Richard Thorne had retreated into disgraced obscurity, his reputation in the industry permanently destroyed. As I walked through the vibrant, expanding Vanguard offices, I was greeted with respect and genuine admiration from my new colleagues. We were building something extraordinary, something far greater than Apex had ever been, built on a foundation of genuine innovation and merit, not nepotism and ego. Sometimes, the most devastating revenge is not an angry outburst or a petty act of sabotage. It is the cold, calculated withdrawal of your own brilliance, allowing those who undervalued you to face the harsh, unforgiving reality of their own incompetence. I had built their empire, and I had destroyed it. And now I was building an even greater one this time, on my own terms. I thought back to the countless late nights, the missed family dinners, the relentless pursuit of excellence that had brought me here. It was a bitter pill to swallow, realizing that loyalty was merely a currency they spent whenever it suited their selfish needs. The polished surface of the mahogany table reflected the harsh fluorescent lights, glaring back at me like an accusatory stare. I adjusted my posture, refusing to let them see the profound depth of the wound they had just inflicted upon me. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed to deepen, mirroring the dark, cold realization that was settling in my heart. Outside, the traffic moved in a continuous, unfeeling stream, a stark contrast to the sudden, catastrophic halt of my career.